What is going on, guys? It's Kyle with Never Hedge here for a brand new show. This show is titled Like It or Not, These Are the Rules, a deep dive into the rules and regulations in MMA. It's something I'm passionate about. The rules and regulations, I think you should know them if you're going to be covering a sport. And I don't think a lot of people actually know the rules. Episode 1. This is episode 1 you're watching right now. And episode 1 is going to be focusing on scoring criteria. So scoring criteria in MMA, obviously a hot topic. I'm sure you see on Twitter and hear everyone talking about, they say damage is king. Well, is it? During this episode, you will hear from multiple UFC fighters, some of your favorite personalities on Twitter and other podcasts, and we'll go over the rules directly. Let me share my screen with you, and we'll get started on the UFC scoring criteria. So, what better to start with the UFC rules than by going to the UFC website itself? So, if you go to the UFC website and then go to Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts, you will get taken to this page. It takes you to the overview. So the Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts aim to provide a clear set of rules governing professional MMA competition that remains consistent across the jurisdictions of various athletic commissions and other regulatory bodies. The frameworks of the Unified Rules of MMA was proposed and agreed upon by various athletic commissions in the 2000s and unanimously adopted by the Association of Boxing Commissions, ABC, on July 30th, 2009. So the UFC uses the Association of Boxing Commissions Unified Rules of MMA. So the Unified Rules of MMA, they govern the scoring criteria, the fouls, prohibited substances, and UFC goes on and explains that they go above and beyond with their doping policy and etc. But what we want to focus on is their judging criteria. So it doesn't list much here on the UFC site itself. There's not much here. So you go down, UFC position concerning regulation. So blah blah blah, unified rules. Just again. So then here are the actual rules of MMA, which we will cover in upcoming episodes. But like I said, we're going to focus on scoring criteria for this one. But it actually has no scoring criteria listed on the official UFC site. If you click on judging criteria, it takes you to this page here. MMA referee and judging training outline. You have to scroll down because this is for trainers and referees. If you scroll down to the second page, you'll get the MMA judge training outline. So qualifications, 5 years professional MMA judging experience. That's minimum. Must possess adequate knowledge to recognize and describe various holds, throws, takedowns, and submission techniques. I would hope so. Must be able to present instructional material to a wide range of individuals with varying educational backgrounds, provide a full resume, provide any prior teaching experience. So then it goes into ethics, proper appearance, a review of the unified rules, judging criteria, which we will get. I have pulled up. We will go over these rules. Review of boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, judo, and jiu-jitsu. Emphasis on submission attempts and how to advance to a position to finish the fight. I mean, these are things we talk about all the time. We hope our judges train. We hope they're at least training. I'd like to say I wish they competed, but I hope they're at least training, because you will understand the emphasis on submission attempts, advancing position, and just how important control actually is. And then here are some scoring issues. So the 10-10 round. I wish that they went deeper into this. By clicking around a little bit, you can find they do define what a 10-8 round is and all that kind of stuff. But they don't elaborate on some of these other ideas. how to account for a point deduction, what to do with incomplete round, identifying each contestant on the scorecard by corner, name, and trunks. Does defense score points? Like, I would love to see where this is elaborated. I could not find it. What is an active threatening guard? Scoring points while on your back. What is effective aggressiveness? What is fighting area control? Which fighter is imposing their will? Striker versus grappler. Dictating pace and position. Discuss rear mount. Discuss side mount. Passing the guard. What is the impact of submission attempt that does not finish the fight? That is a great question. We see it happen all the time. How does it judge it? It's very subjective. Does it matter which fighter looks fresher and isn't cut or swollen at the end of the fight? I mean, these are things fans always talk about, but we're really not sure how they're scored in MMA, and going to the official site doesn't make it any clearer. I think it just is subjective. So then it goes into kind of just concentration, the referee, not anything else on scoring criteria. But we do want to know a little bit more about the scoring criteria, so let's go over to the unified rules. We're now on the unified rules. Association of Boxing Commissions, ABC, Unified Rules of Mixed Martial Arts. So scoring, it's a 10-point system as defined as follows. All bouts will be evaluated and scored by 3 judges. The 10-point must system will be the standard system of the scoring bout. Under the 10-point must system, 10 points must be awarded to the winner of the round, and 9 points or less must be awarded to the loser, except for an even round, which is scored 10-10. I think most people watching this know this already. There's not much to argue about this point. So as of 2019, unified rules. Effective striking/grappling shall be considered the first priority of round assessment. Effective aggressiveness is Plan B and should not be considered unless the judge does not see any, emphasis on the word any, advantage in effective striking/grappling realm. Cage/ring control, Plan C, should only be needed when all, emphasis on all, other criteria are 100% even for both competitor. This will be an extremely rare occurrence. So, aggressiveness means nothing unless the striking and grappling is 100% even. If there is any advantage in the effective striking/grappling realm, Plan B doesn't come into play. Then, if each fighter is equally aggressive and the striking and grappling, there's no advantage, then cage/ring control comes into play. I could see why that would be extremely rare after reading the exact verbiage of this. But to get aggressiveness into play, does that mean we're counting strikes? Are we counting effective strikes? Again, it becomes subjective to the judge. But let's get into how they define effective striking and grappling. So legal blows that have immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match with immediate, again, they're focusing on the word immediate, weighing in more heavily than the cumulative impact. So if you rock your opponent, hit him one time, but you get hit 10 times and you're never rocked, your one strike trumps the 10. Successful execution of takedowns, submission attempts, reversals, and the achievement of advantageous positions that produce immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute to the end of the match, with the immediate weighing more heavily than the cumulative impact, is effective grappling. Now, this is an interesting line right here that I don't think a lot of people know. You see this as an argument constantly. and it's because people just don't read the rules. This is in the official rules. It shall be noted that a successful takedown is not merely a changing of position, but the establishment of an attack from the use of the takedown. So a takedown, a successful one, not an attempt, a successful takedown is an attack. Okay. Top and bottom position fighters are assessed more on the impactful/effective result of their action, more so than their position. So once you're in the position, you're no longer attacking with a takedown. Now you've changed positions. You're then, after the takedown, you're then judged on what you do from that point on. This criterion will be the deciding factor in a high majority of decisions when scoring a round. The next two criteria must be treated as a backup and used only when effective striking and grappling is 100% equal for the round. So yeah, I really wish that they went deeper into like submission attempts. How do you judge them? Right now they're leaving that up to the eye of the beholder. But let's keep on reading. So effective aggressiveness, like we said, this isn't really going to come into effect unless there's nothing really going on in this fight or it's just dead even. So aggressively making attempts to finish the fight, the key term is effective. Chasing after an opponent with no effect, result, or impact should not render the judge's assessment. So they're saying effective aggressiveness is only be assessed if effective striking. This is the most confusing part of the rule book. So aggressively making attempts to finish the fight, the key term is effective. So chasing after an opponent with no effective result or being aggressive via opponent backing up should not impact the judge's assessment. So effective aggressiveness is not even being aggressive. It's aggressively making attempts to finish the fight. So just because you're being aggressive is not effective aggressiveness. So it's not just who's more aggressive and then you win a point for that. That's not the case. You can be backpedaling the entire time, being the less aggressive fighter, and when you choose your aggressive points, you could win this round. That's kind of confusing. I'm glad it rarely comes into effect. Fighting area control. So fighting area control is assessed by determining who is dictating the pace, place, and position of the fight. Fighting area control shall only be assessed if effective striking/grappling and effective aggressiveness is 100% equal for both competitors. This will be assessed very rarely. It doesn't go into more detail. It's pretty obvious, though. If you're keeping it on the feet, you're winning that fighting area control. If you're taking them down, you're winning that fighting area control. Round scoring. So it does get into how to score a 10-10 round. Is when both fighters have competed for whatever duration of time in the round and there's no difference or advantage between either fighter. A 10-10 round in MMA should be extremely rare and is not a score to be used as an excuse by a judge that cannot assess the difference in a round. A 10-10 round in MMA is a necessity to have for a judge's possible score, mainly due to scoring incomplete rounds. Again, 10-10 rounds, 10-9 rounds. I think these are pretty understood. A 10-10 rounds even, or if the round's incomplete. 10-9 round is your typical score. In MMA is where one combatant wins the round by a close margin. A 10-9 round in MMA is the most common score a judge assess during the fight. If during the round the judge sees a fighter land the better strikes or utilize effective grappling during the competition, even if by just one technique over their opponent, the judge shall give the winning round a fighter score of 10 while assessing loser score of 9. It is imperative that judges understand that a score of a 9 is not an automatic numeral score given to the losing fighter of the round. I think that's an important point. we see 10-9s all the time, and it's supposed to be for close rounds. We see rounds all the time that are not close at all get scored 10-9. So I'm interested to see what they have under 10-8. The judge must consider, was the fighter engaged in offensive action during the round? Did the losing fighter compete with an attitude of attempting to win the fight? Now that just got even more subjective. Did the losing fighter compete with an attitude of attempting to win the fight or just trying to survive? I mean, that is all up to the eye of the beholder there. A 10-8 round, let's see. A 10-8 round in MMA is where one fighter wins the round by a large margin. A 10-8 round in MMA is not the most common score a judge will render, but is absolutely essential to the evolution of the sport and fairness to the fighters that judges understand effectively utilizing the score 10-8. The score 10-8 is utilized by the judge when the judge sees verifiable actions on the part of either fighter. Judge shall always give a score of 10-8 when the judge has established that one fighter has dominated the action. I think we should be seeing more 10-8 rounds in MMA. According to the rules, we are not seeing nearly as many 10-8 rounds as we should. Let's see. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in a fight, utilize those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attack. If a fighter has little to no offensive output during a 5-minute round, it should be normal for a judge to consider awarding the losing fighter 8 points. I mean, we see that all the time as 10-9. Guy gets taken down. The guy on top of him doesn't do much, but the guy on the bottom doesn't do anything. According to these rules, that's a 10-8. A judge shall, impact. A judge shall assess if a fighter impacts their opponent significantly in the round. Even though they may not have dominated the action, impact includes visible evidence such as swelling and lacerations. Ooh. Sorry, Nate Diaz. Impact shall also be assessed when a fighter's action using striking and or grappling lead to the diminishing of their opponent's energy. I mean, that's huge right there. How can we not say that grappling and being a dominant grappler is not diminishing their opponent's energy, confidence, and abilities and spirit? All of these come as a direct result of impact. So right there, I think this flip that we've seen recently where striking is just valued so much more than grappling, I mean, it's right here in the rule book. That is exactly what dominant wrestlers are doing. They're zapping their opponent's energy. They're zapping their confidence and abilities and spirit. That's in the official rules. Their spirit. Gotta love it. When a fighter is impacted with strikes by lack of control and or ability, this can create defining moments in a round and shall be assessed with great value. Let's go on to dominance. As MMA is an offensive-based sport, dominance of a round can be seen in striking when the losing fighter is forced to continually defend. Okay, again. That's exactly what we saw in the Islam Makhachev versus why can't I think of his name? God dang. I got a little bit too toasted this weekend, and now I've just got brain fog where I can't even think of one of the best champions in the world's name. It's unbelievable. Alexander Volkanovski. Oh my God. I got to stop drinking. It's ridiculous. But that's exactly what we saw in Islam Makhachev's fight versus Alexander Volkanovski. Yeah, maybe when Alex was on his back, he wasn't being the most effective, but he was being dominant. He was forcing Volkanovski to defend despite the smiles and yells and punches behind his own head. That was for show. He was defending a choke from Islam. Let's continue to read. Sorry, Alexander Volkanovski. I promise I'm not normally this dumb. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in the fight and utilizing those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attacks. Merely holding a dominant position shall not be a prominent factor in assessing dominance. Now that's interesting. Let's go back to the beginning of this real quick. As an MMA is an offensive-based sport, dominance of a round can be seen in striking when the losing fighter is forced to continuously defend. Okay, so that's specifically for striking. Dominance in grappling phase, okay. So holding a dominant position, that's very interesting. So I have to just take back what I just said. I disagree with the official rules. Because if you're in a dominant position, who am I to say that Islam wasn't working for a submission? And that it wasn't just because of the great defense of Volkanovski that we didn't see a quick submission from Islam. I mean, we saw it in the past with lesser fighters than Volkanovski. In the absence of dominance in the grappling phase, as set forth in paragraph 3 of the promulgated rules, to be considered dominant, there must be singularly or in combination some type of submission attempts, strikes, or an overwhelming pace, which is merely improve or aggressive positional changes that cause the losing fighter to consistently be in defensive or reactive mode. So that's a bit subjective because anyone who knows grappling and jiu-jitsu knows, was Islam just resting? Possibly. He was tired. But, I mean, with Islam on your back, he's always trying to set something up. I just don't get, how do you not know, how do we know if it wasn't just the great defense of Volkanovski, where Islam was trying to attempt, he just wasn't successful at all. I mean, that's a hard one. It's subjective, and again, it does skew, this dominance rule, and the verbiage of this dominance rule does skew towards striking. That's interesting to note. So duration is defined by the time spent by one fighter effectively attacking, controlling. This is going to be the opposite of what we just read. Let's see what duration is. Duration is defined by the time spent by one fighter effectively attacking, controlling, and impacting their opponents. While the opponent offers little to no offensive output, a judge shall assess duration by recognizing the relative time in a round when one fighter takes and maintains full control of the effective offense. This can be assessed both standing and grounded. That's literally the opposite of what we just read. Holy shit. The UFC official rules just contradicted itself. Let's read those back to back. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in fight and utilizing those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attack. Merely holding a dominant position shall not be a primary factor in assessing dominance. Duration. Duration is defined by the time spent by one fighter effectively attacking, controlling, and impacting their opponent while the opponent offers little to no offensive output. That's Islam on his back. That's ridiculous. We wonder why we get such bad judging in MMA. It's the rules. The rules are off. That's insane. A 10-7 round, which we never see. We probably should see more of them because there are some dominant-ass rounds in MMA. A 10-7 round in MMA is when a fighter completely overwhelms their opponent in effective striking and or grappling, and stoppage is warranted. A 10-7 round in MMA is scored that judges will rarely give. It takes both overwhelming dominance of a round, but also significant impact. Yeah, absolute dominance is a 10-7, and I think we see it a little bit more often than not. Like, was there? I can't remember. Glover versus Alex Smith. Did they score that at a 10-7 round? Because it absolutely should have been. And then the rules go on, and these are just the rules. It's not scoring criteria, so we won't cover that right now. But those are the unified rules of MMA. I don't know if I just cleared things up for some people or just made things, muddied the waters even more. I think I muddied the waters for myself a little more. So the rules do seem to skew a little bit towards striking, unless you keep reading all the rules, then it contradicts itself, and controlling your opponent does matter. Zapping their energy does matter. They're subjective. They're completely subjective rules. The judges basically decide for themselves at this point what matters and what doesn't. But with that said, now that we know the rules, we just read them. That was the entire scoring criteria for the UFC. Was very short, to the point. You could read it for yourself. I'll include the links in this in the comment section below in the description. Now let's hear from some of our favorite people. Let's start with Clint from Die Hard MMA. So let's hear what Clint has to say about the rules and regulations and scoring criteria. So Clint said, "When it comes to scoring, I feel like we have overcorrected on the grappling. A few years back, the UFC was dominated by wrestlers, and the judges and promotions, and especially Dana White and his Contender Series, have driven home the concept that blanket control is not a thing that wins fights anymore, but I believe we have strayed too far. People forget that effective grappling is neutralizing your opponent. They don't want to hear that a wrestler is dominating somebody without landing ground and pound to go with it, but I would argue that taking your foe completely out of the fight is domination. As a whole, when it comes to scoring MMA fights, I do look for damage first. But when the damage is minimal or it apparent that the one receiving the punches is not in any way affected by the strikes, then the cage control and wrestling starts to take over. Islam versus Volkanovski was a perfect example. Islam had the control, however, it was apparent that when he was hanging on for dear life. Okay, so Clint does think he was hanging on for dear life. He had the dominant position of Volkanovski's back, but I cannot argue that he was winning the fight in that position because Volkanovski was laughing at him and punching him in the face while he tried to catch his breath. Each individual fight has to be scored on its own merits, but generally speaking, I feel that we have taken too much away from the wrestlers in MMA. I don't want boring fights, don't get me wrong, but I do believe that if you completely take your opponent out of the fight and you are never in any danger, that is winning. At the end of the day, MMA judging is extremely subjective. We just learned that. And I don't know that there's any fix. Because we have blended so many different styles and because no two fights are ever exactly the same, you can argue a relative intelligent take on nearly every fight depending on what you value. I think at the end of the day, we all just need to buckle up for the ride because I'm not sure there is an answer to a better judging system in this crazy sport. Like Dana White always said, don't leave it to the judges." I agree with Clint, and he seems to have a decent grasp of the actual rules. The judging is extremely subjective. As we said, it leans a little bit towards striking at this moment. And like I said, I think we went a little bit too far, and we're not valuing grappling as much as we should. Manny from MMA Fight Club had to say, under the new scoring criteria, damage, i.e. cuts or knockdowns, and we just did learn cuts do matter. Cuts and swelling, it matters. It's in the actual rules. It's supposed to be more valuable than holding someone on the ground for minutes on end, yet we are still seeing screwy scorecards that don't make sense, i.e. Pimblet and Tarkugov. I'm a big fan of the open scoring system. Okay. It will not solve everything, but it at least lets the fighters/corners know where they stand. Every other major sport has a scorecard. It's time for MMA and boxing to get with the program. Judges are doodling on the scorecards instead of doing their damn job. Maybe open scoring would also put a little more pressure on the judges. I agree. I mean, it would definitely put pressure on the judges. It would also let the fighters know, hey, man, I got to get after it this round. or it will let them know I can kind of skate by. Open scoring is a big debate. I don't really know where I fall. Comment under here if you would like to see open scoring in MMA, because I truly don't know where I stand on that issue. But let's hear from some people in the UFC. So this is what UFC flyweight Cody Durden had to say on scoring criteria. He said, "When I fight, I'm looking to finish my opponents. Sometimes when you win the round convincingly. Other times there might be a time in the fight where things got nasty and you have to ask your corner if you won. If you finish the fight, you don't have to worry about the judges. That's my goal." And I can tell you, Cody Durden fights that way. You watch his fights, he's going for the finish. You have to think that the subjectivity is on his mind. He doesn't want it to get to the judges, so he's going to finish the damn fight. UFC Women's Flyweight, Miranda Maverick has to say, "When I get into a fight, I'm looking to do damage and finish the fight each round. Control from pressure on the feet to being in dominant positions on the ground. With inconsistent judging, it is hard to know if I've won a round when I go back to my corner. Ground control should definitely count. Even if a person is defending well, if they aren't offensive, the person with back control, etc., should be awarded more credit. If the person on bottom, say guard, is throwing up submissions, elbows from bottom, etc., doing damage while person on top isn't doing anything, person on bottom could be winning. Standing up people I am against, though. If a fighter can't get up, that is their problem." Couldn't agree more with the Miranda Maverick there. I hate seeing fighters get stood up. They couldn't get up. It's like Alex Volkanovski with the back kick. He couldn't get him off. I just keep bringing that up because it's the most recent fight that I could think of that had this major issue. That fight was extremely close. It could have gone either way. I'm just bringing that up because it just happened. But I agree with the Maverick here. She also was looking for the finish. But former UFC heavyweight and current PFL fighter and heavyweight, Juan Adams, has a little bit of a different take. He said, "When I go into a fight, all I think about accomplishing is winning. I always think of the finish and minimizing the damage I take. I know I'm going to get hit, but I want to hit more than I get hit." He said, "I do think of the scoring criteria, so I try to do at least one offensive thing in every aspect of the criteria." I guess he means he tries to mix in effective grappling and striking. "I usually feel like I know the outcome of each round, but my coaches tell me as soon as I sit on the stool. Then we discuss the plan of attack for the next round and what I need to do to win that one." So a little bit different take from Juan Adams. I know Juan was a former teacher, so he may come in with a little bit different perspective, a little more analytical maybe. And he is thinking about that scoring criteria. So just interesting to see the different perspectives of these fighters, and I was glad to hear some feedback from them. Let's hear from Patrick from Addicted to Combat. So Patrick said, "I can watch the fight as a fan for entertainment or watch it objectively to score it. It's difficult to do both at once. I have to agree. I do it all the time, and I'm definitely biased at times. Having lots of cash on the line clouds my vision of scoring as well. Have to agree. When you look at the commission's rule books, many of the ways damage is scored is extremely subjective. So I'm rarely shocked at split decisions for fights that have close rounds. Again, we just read the rules. They're all subjective. The scoring in MMA is subjective. And then lastly, we got Johnny from Johnny K Picks. He said, "When I watch fights, this is how I judge/score fights for the fighters in each round." He said, 1, overall damage, whether it's on the feet or on the mat, damage is king and trumps everything. Knockdowns, cuts, bruises, etc. 2, effective striking. Striking accuracy, volume, how hard/clean the significant strikes land. Okay, so he does, after damage, Johnny K Picks values striking more than grappling. And then 3, effective grappling. Transitions to dominant positions, working for submissions and ground strikes, control time, laying on top of fighters, or holding fighters up against the cage with no urge to go for the finish doesn't really score points for me. Nor does it take away points either. Obviously, I'm not a judge nor claim to be, but I try to keep it simple. I do think the judging criteria is a little too complicated and can be very subjective depending on the judge. Not to say they are right or wrong, but if you keep the judging criteria simple, you'll have less crazy scorecards. For example, 2 judges giving a fighter a 29-28 and the other judge giving it a 30-27. I will say I do feel the judges favor striking a little more than grappling, which makes sense due to the current judging criteria. He's not wrong. We just read the rules. I would say they favor striking slightly in some areas of the rule book. In other areas, it contradicts it and goes back on its own word. So those are, like it or not, these are the rules. These are the scoring criteria. Like it or not, this is how fights, your favorite sport, UFC, this is how they're judged. I don't know if there's an answer to improve this. I don't know if there's a way to make it less subjective. How can you make it less subjective? You know, you see a fighter get rocked by a punch, right? To us, they're rocked. To that fighter, he may say he was fine. You know, it's subjective. A knockdown, you know, he may say he slipped. It's a little bit subjective. I know people get pissed off and argue all the time, damage is king. As we saw, that's not necessarily true. Grappling and control, zapping your opponent's energy, breaking their will, those are all points in the actual rule book for scoring criteria. I hope you learned something today, and next time you watch a fight, maybe be a little bit easier on these judges. All right, guys. I'll see you next week.